Hi, I'm Melike. I'm in group 2 with Paola, and this is my workbook so far on my chosen designer, which is Karl Gerstner. Gerstner was a Swiss graphic designer mainly known for his work with type. He was born in 1930 and established his own graphic design agency in 1949. He was actually one of the first to popularize the use of unjustified right ragged text, which, like a lot of his ideas and even the Swiss style movement, were really to benefit legibility. He really emphasized the use of typography to visually express the meanings of words through the way they were positioned or the scale. And in general, he was described as having a holistic view, concentrating on the meaning and subject as a whole, as opposed to only focusing on the individual elements of a certain project. Much of his designs related back to his use of programs. He described them as a structure to be creative in. His ideas weren't to limit creativity to this strict defined approach, but more to keep a designer focused. Ideation is such an important part of the process, as we know, finding which concepts to explore, figuring out what works best. And his approach was just to minimize those and to save time, to use these programs as a way to keep you focused on the ideas you do need to develop, to ensure they all relate back to the design problem that you're trying to solve. I also included information on his use of grids and the own grid that he formed for the magazine called Capital. Again, like his programs, they're really well thought out, and they do look very intimidating at first, but they provide a general template where you can mix and match to test different layouts while still having a consistent look to your work. The first image there is of him, definitely a very fitting one for everything I've learned about him so far. Those series of posters next to him are some of my favorites of his work. I like how the text is formatted in a way that kind of matches the shape of the squares or the circles above it, really guides you through them. Something I find really interesting with his work is that obviously it's mostly written in German, but for some of them, before I'd read the caption or found a translated version of it, I could already understand the concept behind it just in the way that the text has been used. That one on the bottom right there is made for a company that sells measuring equipment. The word volley means fuller, which is showing through the filling and the colouring of the text. And again, you can see a lot of his work uses placement to show certain concepts. The tears up there on the right are actually made out of layered plexiglass, so they're not completely flat but raised upwards. He was also known as an artist, and that was some of his most featured work that I found. In the middle there is a table of another one of his programs. It was a way to efficiently develop a word mark by refining all the variations of it that you could produce. So you'd choose the concepts that you'd want to represent and then use that to guide you in, which typefaces you'd use or how you'd position them. And again, that was to help with that ideation process. Up on the top there, you can see his grid that I talked about. Next to it, it's very small, but you can kind of see how it's broken up into a bunch of smaller grids, which makes it a little easier to understand. I think I could even try following that approach for some of my brochure layouts. Below that is one of his many newspapers, and again, really simple, just an effect of how he's used the photographs and the text together. And finally, on the bottom left, there is one of his book covers, which uses his own typeface that he created, a corporate typeface for IBM. It wasn't commercially successful, but he ended up using it for a lot of his own work, which I thought was really interesting. For my first mind map, I looked at modernism, as that was the period that he was most active in and influenced by, though I did end up branching out into the Swiss style, which he was also very involved in, the use of grids, photographs, and minimalism. It was so influential that it became an internationally recognized style, and you can see that through a lot of his work. Next, I looked at teaching. A lot of his books and publishings looked at his own methods and theories, his programs, which are used by web designers and digital media today, and how a lot of his writing has and continues to influence and guide graphic design. Finally, I looked at his holistic approach. He put a lot of focus on looking at an idea as a whole, ensuring all the elements of it, such as the words and the meaning, all relate back to the main concept, making sure the content relates back to the form. For my title, I started by listing titles from his own published works to give me a starting point of his style of wording. From there, I used words from my own brainstorms to build on, such as pioneer or holistic. I decided on the Gerstner program. I think it suits the formal nature of the brochure the best and accurately describes his systematic approach to designing. It also happens to be the name of one of the typefaces that he developed. Spelling it with a double M as it's written in German relates back to his Swiss identity and reflects his use of the word throughout his publishings and theories. For the reflective text, I talked about his importance in typography and looked at his systematic approach to design, how he aimed to focus creativity through using his developed programs, his influence on the Swiss style movement, and where his work is featured today. I think all three of my chosen themes relate back to Gerstner's design approach. His teachings can be applied to the layout of the brochure, especially, like I said, the grid. A holistic approach of view is the basis of a lot of his ideas, and I think that's something that I can definitely use. Both modernist principles and just the ideas of the international typographic style were influenced by him and can be followed for the brochure. That's pretty much all my ideas so far. Thank you for listening.